I want to tell you a couple of things about me just so you'll be aware of them. First of all, since you don't know me, you need to know I believe in the inspired Word of God. I believe it is inspired from every word of it. And I would never, ever purposely do anything to contradict it or that any way would take away from it or abuse it or misuse it. And I want to give you that assurance. And if at any point in my preaching you feel like, I don't think that's what the Bible says about that, please talk to me about it. I can learn, I can grow, and I can be wrong. I'm very human. The second thing I want you to know is I love the church. I have a great passion for the Lord's kingdom, for His family. I love His family. What a blessing it is. I don't know of anything greater than being a part of the church that is of Christ, the church that belongs to Jesus. And I would not do anything at all in any way to do any harm to it. So when you preach a meeting, there's this push between desiring to make an impact, to influence people as been prayed about, but to do no harm. And I don't want to leave and not make any impact. So I remember when I first started preaching in Hamilton, Alabama years ago, we decided to build this bridge out at Maywood Christian Camp that's just down the road from the Hamilton building. And two friends of mine from Alabama, Gene and Eugene, that's their names, father and son, decided they were building the bridge. And so one day I decided to go out and I was going to help them, which means I was going to watch them. You don't want to walk on a bridge I've built, but they're building this bridge and I'm kind of talking to them and I start saying, well, who are some of the preachers you've enjoyed in the past that have been here? Of course, you know what I was doing. I was hoping they'd say you, but they didn't say that. Who are some of the preachers you've liked that have been here in the past? And they started talking about W.T. Allison and Levi Sides and Jerry Jenkins, my dad, and different preachers that had preached there. And then the father and son got in an argument. They argued over if there was a guy between Edsel Burleson and Levi Sides. And they argued for 15 minutes not about what the guy's name was, but about whether the guy even existed or not. That's not the guy I want to be. So in trying to motivate you and encourage you, I will sometimes try to say some things that will challenge you in your life. I'll try to say some things hopefully that will help you to be more challenged. So tonight we're going to talk about handling stress. And a couple of you said when you came in, that's why you came, because you want to know how to handle stress. I don't know how you do things here, and I don't want to do anything inappropriate, but let's try this for a minute. What are some of the things that cause you stress in your life? What are some of the things that bring stress in the lives of people? Is that all right to do? Let you answer out loud? Work. And, work causes all sorts of stress. Will I have a job? Will I keep a job? Will they pay me enough? Will I be able to stay in this job? Will that job even exist anymore in a few years? Work, all right? What else? We got into politics real quick tonight, didn't we? Government causes stress. I don't care what your political views are. There's stress involved. If you're involved in anything in this world, in this country, you are aware of the stress that government can bring into our life. All right, what else? Money causes stress. Not enough or too much. Both of those cause stress. People who have too much money sometimes have more stress than people who have too little. Many of the millionaires in this world deal with broken families and broken homes, and it's a result of arguments over money and how to deal with it when they've got too much. What else? I heard a voice, but I didn't hear what they said. Family. Thank you for not saying my husband. I was preaching this sermon one time, and a guy said, my wife. And I thought, oh me, I've caused trouble now. Didn't even mean to. There are all sorts of stress. Health causes stress in life, doesn't it? All sorts of concerns we have stress. When people get outside of our comfort zone and present something to us that's challenging, it can produce huge stress. Religion produces stress in a lot of people's lives. So there's all sorts of stressors in our life. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at the life of Christ. And this lesson is not original in me. I always like to tell people when that happens, the guy that preached it did a better job than I could have written it, but I can preach it better than he could write it. So I'm going to preach his sermon, okay? The life of Christ. We're going to look tonight at the life of Christ. And we're going to consider tonight how Jesus dealt with stress. Have you ever thought that Jesus would have had stress in his life? I mean, he's constantly under pressure. There are people that are always demanding his time, wanting him to be one place or another, pulling him here and there. He rarely had any privacy. He'd show up at a place and go up into a mountain to pray, and he'd come down off the mountain, there'd be a multitude of people there waiting. He'd go into a city, there would be people blocking the way. He'd go into a house, they'd block the door. He couldn't go in and out. I mean, he rarely had any privacy. He's constantly interrupted. You know, he's teaching people, and there are these scribes and Pharisees and Sadducees that will ask him questions, trying to trick him. He's constantly being interrupted in his life. He had enormous stress in his life that probably would have caused any of us to have caved in. Yet there is a tremendous peace that's in his life. And in the life of Jesus, I think we can learn how to have peace in the midst of pressure. How can we be at peace with all sorts of pressure in our life? I do not know the pressures you have in your life tonight, but I imagine some of you are about fed up with being fed up. You have so much stress in your life and you're not sure really how to handle it or what to do with it. How do you have peace under pressure? And so we're going to look tonight at 7 principles of dealing with the stressors that come into our life. Most people do not have peace in this world. You're aware of that? Most of the folks you work with don't have peace. Most of the people that you go to school with, if you're a student, don't have peace in their life. Most of the people that you're involved with recreationally, most of the people in your neighborhood association don't have peace in their life. We're going to look at some principles tonight from the life of Christ. In John chapter 8 and verse 12, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." And some 18 times in the text, Jesus will use those terms, I am. He will say, I am the door, I'm the good shepherd, I'm the truth, I'm the bread of life, I'm the vine, I am the life, I am the way. In fact, when he says simply, I am, that's in John 6. And that one gets some more trouble than anything else because he equated himself with God when he said, I am. 18 times Jesus will say, I am, and then he will describe who he is. Principle number 1 for dealing with stress in your life that we see in the life of Jesus is the principle of identification. The principle of identification. You might want to write these down or take pictures of them or remember them some way, but I think they'll be helpful to you. And the principle here is to know who you are. Jesus, beyond any shadow of a doubt, knew who he was. In fact, on one occasion he said, I came from the Father and I'm going back to the Father. The principle of know who you are. Here Jesus says, I am he, in John chapter 8, in verse 18, I am he who testifies about myself, and the Father who sent me testifies about me. Jesus said, I know who I am. And when he said, I know who I am, when you decide who you are in life, when you figure out who you are, it'll solve all sorts of problems in your life. You need to have an eternal perspective of who you are. That'll solve so many issues in your life. When you realize I am a child of God. One of the songs David led us in has those words in it. We are the children of God. He is our Father. I don't know how much pressure you feel in your life, brought upon your life by other people, by bosses or spouses or people who bully you in life. But a lot of the angst that people have in their life is because they've never realized that God is their Father. And when you settle that issue, it solves all sorts of problems. Number 2, if you want to get rid of the stress in your life, look at the life of Jesus. We'll look at John chapter 5 here, and we'll talk about the principle of dedication. The principle of dedication. And the principle of dedication is know who you're trying to please. Know who you're trying to please. The Bible says in John chapter 5 and verse 30, from the ESV, Jesus said, I can do nothing of my own. As I hear, I judge. And my judgment is just because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Now watch that. Jesus says, I'm not trying to please myself. I'm trying to seek to please God. And when you settle that question in your life, you talk about lifting a weight off your shoulders. I mean, the problem with trying to please everybody, a lot of people spend their life doing that, trying to please everybody. About the time you get group A happy, Group B is unhappy and upset with you. You rush off to Group B and you try to make them happy. And about the time you get Group B happy, Group C comes along and they start demanding something of you. And you try to keep them happy. And you're running around like a chicken with its head off. And about the time you get Group C happy, Group A is unhappy again and you've got to go back to them. If you spend your life trying to make other people happy and not trying to please God, and that be your North Star, then you will have stress in your life. Trying to please everyone just doesn't work. You probably can't read that on the screen if you're my age or older. So it's a picture of a tombstone with two people standing at it. They say she was a chronic people pleaser, and her tombstone says on it, "I apologize if my death saddens or inconveniences you." You know, some people, their whole life, all they're concerned about is keeping other people happy. You know, the fact is that even God can't satisfy everyone. You know, you think about this time of year, and you got a million school children here in Kentucky praying every night that it'll snow tomorrow. And you got 2 million parents every night praying that it won't snow tomorrow, okay? You can't please everyone. Even God can't. Please God, not people. With Jesus, this issue was settled and decided. He said, I'm going to please God the Father. You know what God said about that? You know what the Father said about this? He said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Hear Him. Matthew chapter 3 and verse 17. You see, if I please God, it takes care of all the other problems in my life. And it comes along and it says, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Seeking God first. If I make that what I determine I'm going to do with my life, if I just center on pleasing God first, if I just work on that one thing, it'll have a tremendous simplifying element in my life. It will simplify everything about my life if I determine God is who I'm going to please. Regardless of what everyone else thinks, if it pleases God, it's the right thing. So you got to decide in your life, I'm going to please God. And you want the pressure to go down in your life? Start striving to please God. Number 3, in the life of Jesus, the stressors that He had, here's how He dealt with it. In John chapter 8 and verse 14, the text says, therefore I bear record of myself, yet my record is true, for I know from where I came and where I go. Here it is, the principle of organization. And we'll call it this, know what you want to accomplish. Know what you want to accomplish. It's amazing how much you can do if you will get your life in a place where you start identifying what your purpose in life is, what you bring to life, what you can do. I preached for 10 years at the Great Granny White Church in Nashville. What a blessing that was in my life. I was leaving and the secretaries and staff wanted to give me a party before we left. And one of the secretaries, her name was Sue. Well, an extra name, I changed it. That would confuse her, I guess, but I don't want you to know her name. We'll call her Sue. Sue gave me a card. They all gave me cards and all. Sue gave me a card and she said, I don't want you to open this until you get to Spring Meadows, till you move and go down there. So I put it on my dashboard in my car wondering what Sue had written to me. Get to Spring Hill, open the card. On the front it says, we are going to miss you. It's nice. Next page. We're not going to miss your preaching. Next page. We're not going to miss your scholarship. Next page. We're not going to miss your ministry. Oh, well, this is the nicest card I've got in my life, you know. Then she said in the next page, we're going to miss your energy. And for the first time in my life, at nearly age 50, I realized what I contribute to what I do. Now, I don't tell you that to tell you about me, but to ask you about you. What do you contribute that others can't? What do you bring in this church family? What energy do you bring to this church? What ability, what talent, what service is yours that you say, I can do this? You know what you want to accomplish. You have to have a plan in your life. You have to set priorities for your life. Rick Warren said, if you don't live by your priorities, you'll live by pressures. Either you determine what's important in life, or other people will determine it for you. So you should start every day by saying, here are my activities for this day. Am I willing to exchange these 24 hours for these activities? Am I willing to give these 24 hours for these things in my life? Principle number 4. Let's leave John's account and let's go to Dr. Luke's account and see what this man that had this physician that had such a tremendous compassion for people. Have you ever thought about Luke's writings? He tells more of the people-oriented stories of Jesus than anyone else. Luke has more interaction in his gospel account with children than any other writer. He has more interaction in his gospel account with women than any of the other writers. That may have been because as a physician, he may have been more comfortable in that setting than some of the other writers would have been in the first century. But Luke comes along and he introduces Jesus to us as the only perfect man that ever lived. You know the key verse in the book, Luke 2, verse 52, Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. The Greek state said, if you have a baby girl, throw her out on the street, let her die. If you have a baby boy, give him to the Greek state, and we'll make him the perfect man physically, mentally, and socially. Luke comes along and says Jesus was perfect mentally, wisdom, socially, in favor of men. What was the other one? Physically, he grew in wisdom and stature, but he had a fourth element, in favor with God. Some of you men out there may think, religion is not really that, it's really for women and children, it's not for men. The perfect man that ever lived, the only perfect man that ever lived, said it is for men and for women and for children. It's for everyone. Luke chapter 4 and verse 42 and 43 says, and the crowd sought him and came to him and tried to keep him from leaving them, but he said to them, I must preach the kingdom of God to other cities also, because for this purpose I have been sent. So get the setting. Jesus is preaching in one place and healing in one place, and he starts to leave, and they say, don't leave. And he says, my mission is not to go to a place and stay. My mission is to go preach the gospel everywhere I can. And verse 44 says, and he preached in the synagogues of Galilee. He went forward. He kept on preaching. Fourth principle, the principle of concentration. The principle of concentration. You have to learn to focus on one thing at a time. Learn to put your focus. Learn to intensify your focus. You want to have less stress in your life? Learn to get great focus in your life. Some of you remember when you were in 5th grade, and the teacher gave all the students, it was a sunny day, and the teacher gave all the students a magnifying glass and told you to go outside and get a leaf, maybe in the springtime or maybe in the fall, and get a leaf and focus that magnifying glass from the sun through the glass to the leaf. And if you were real lucky, it kind of turned brown or black, and if you were really lucky, maybe it had a little spark in it, You think of the power of focus. You know how powerful lasers are? You know what lasers are? Focus light. If we could ever learn to focus our life, well, Jesus is a master of everything, and is a master at teaching us about focus. I mean, everybody had a plan B for him. John 6, we already referenced it tonight when he says, I am. You remember how that chapter starts? He feeds the 5,000, and then the text says that he perceived they were going to take him by force and make him king. Imagine yourself as a first century Jew. You're living under the Roman Empire, and you see this man cause blind people to see and deaf people to hear and lame people to walk, and you realize he is not a man. He's not like anyone else. And your thought may have been exactly what theirs was. Not that He's going to establish an eternal kingdom, but we want Him, if anybody can overthrow the Roman government, He can do it. So they're going to take Him by force. Everybody had a plan B for the life of Jesus. Why don't you do this? The text says He kept heading toward His goal. He kept right on doing what He knew that God had for Him to do, preaching about the kingdom. He was determined. He was persistent. And He concentrated His efforts. Number 5, Mark chapter 5. The text says in Mark 3, verses 13 through 15, He went up in the mountains and He called those to Him whom He desired, and they came to Him, and He appointed 12, whom He also named apostles, so that they might be with Him, and He might send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. Number 5, it's the principle of delegation. Jesus delegated. And the lesson here is, don't try to do it all by yourself. You realize a lot of the stress you have in your life is because you're trying to keep all the plates spinning. You're trying to do it all. I'm not going to beat you up over this tonight. But sometimes it's because we don't think anybody else can do it. Most often it's because we don't think anybody else will do it. But the truth is, if you ever learn to delegate, you ever learn to do what you do well, and to pass on to someone else what you don't do well, or what they might do well, it'll be tremendous in your life. The principle of delegation. I mean, why do we get so uptight? Why? You remember, some of you are old enough to remember back when the computers first started coming out in the late 70s and early 80s, and there are all these magazine articles that came out, and they were saying, soon we'll see the 3-day work week. They'd say something like, a lot of jobs are going to be no longer going to be obsolete because we'll be a paperless society, and there'll be less work and more leisure and all that stuff. Well, has computers made you less busy? No. Most of you probably take yours home at night and do more work when you get home. They made us more busy. The reason we get so uptight is we're trying to do everything. We're kind of like Atlas. We feel like we're holding the whole world up on our shoulders. And if we let go of it, it's all going to crumble and fall apart. I want to let you know something. If you let go, the world's not going to fall apart. If you start focusing on what you are here to do and what you can do, and you start delegating those things to other people that someone else can do, you'll be amazed at what will happen. And this is from the life of Jesus. There's only one person that ever lived that could ever do it all by himself. And the text tells us that He appointed 12. Did Jesus have to appoint apostles? He could have done it without them. He's Jesus. Did they get in His way? I mean, if you read the text, it looks like they got in His way a lot. I don't know, maybe you don't see that, but they were just, most of them, fishermen. And not very good fishermen at that, were they? Every time we meet them, they're mending their nets. I mean, they bumbled things up. He had to go behind them, clean up the mistakes they made. He could have done it maybe even better by himself. But that's not God's desire and intent. God's desire is that we use our talents and our abilities, that on this earth we become His hands, His feet. Could God do this all without us? He could, but He chooses not to. And the one person that could do it all delegated. Number 6. This time in Mark chapter 1. In the morning, rising up a great while before day, He went out and departed into a solitary place, and there He prayed. And I have just now realized something. I've been preaching for 42 years. I have never been in a church building that didn't have a clock. Did you do that? Did you get there? Good job. I've been in several where they have the clocks on the side where the preacher can't see them, I know the intent is that people won't be looking behind them, But that's not really fair when they do that. And not only that, part of the U-Haul story, my watch battery's dead. We may be here a while, okay? All right. So while it was morning, he goes out to a deserted place and he prays. When you get less stress in your life, look at the life of Jesus. The principle of meditation. Make a habit of personal prayer. God has given us a great tool for letting off our anxieties. Prayer is the gigantic stress reliever in our life. Somebody said prayer is the valve that releases the steam of stress and pressure in our life. Gets rid of stress. Begin to pray more. Now you say, I'm too busy to pray. You don't know my schedule. Well, I knew Jesus' schedule, and I think He was busier than you were. And I think what He was doing, I'm not discounting your work, but I think you'd agree, if you're a Christian, that what He was doing was more important than what you're doing. And I think you'll agree that His relationship with God was probably in better shape than your relationship with God is as well. But He still took time to pray. He never got too busy to pray. Oh, I've got so many things to do. I mean, if you only knew how much I've got to do. You don't have time not to pray. It is a decompression chamber of life. A time where you... So that takes the place of the clock, huh? That's worse. Get the clock back, at least. I was preaching in a place up in Colorado a few years ago, and they had a clock on the pulpit right here, okay? The digital clock. You've been there? Countdown clock. And at 2 minutes, or 5 minutes, that thing turned red, and it counted down by the second. And at 2 minutes, it started flashing. I thought, man, I don't know what's going to happen when it ends. Nothing, just I'll let you know, okay? You need to get along with God, just you and God, all by yourself, and talk to God in prayer. Tell Him what's on your mind. Tell Him what your hurts are. Tell Him what's threatening you right now. Tell Him what your concerns are about family and children and grandchildren and friends, about our country and our world. Man, if your prayer list isn't long right now, it'll never get long. And then let God talk to you as you read His Word. It'll bless your life. I mean, get your act together before you start your day. We have this amazing inability to sit still, even for a few minutes. It's hard for us to sit still. I'm a professional hypnotist. I've been hypnotizing people for about 30 years now. I've been putting people to sleep for about 44 years. But I'm hypnotizing people for about 30 years or so now. And one of the things I've learned about people is they have a hard time being still. They have a hard time disconnecting. They have a hard time not checking, don't do it when I say it, Facebook or their phone for messages or whatever else their social media is. And you know, we start our day, we turn on the television, we see bad news. Then we turn on the radio when we get in the car and we hear more bad news. We pick up the newspaper and we see more bad news. And many of us walk around with those little things in our ears and we're listening to bad news all the time. It's no wonder that our days start off miserable. The text says in the book of Psalms, "Be still and know that I am God." It's powerful, isn't it? That you'll grow closer to God if you take some time to be still and realize that He is God. The reason a lot of people don't know God is they can't be still. And the reason a lot of people's faith doesn't grow from when they first become a Christian is they never have this stillness in their life where they can focus on who God is. It's ironic, Roald May said, it's an ironic habit of human beings to run faster when we've lost our way. You ever been lost? You panic and you start moving faster. If moving faster will get you unlost. World War II, there was a pilot flying out over the Pacific. And they radioed into him and said, "You're off target. Where are you?" And he said, "I don't know, but I'm making great time." A lot of us that way in life, aren't we? We don't know where we are, what we're trying to do, but we're making great time about it. Going a million miles in many different directions, but we don't know what we're going to do when we get there or what's going to happen when we get there. What is your purpose in life? So, start the day with prayer, and then throughout the day, pray. That's what Paul is writing to the church at Thessalonica when he said, pray without ceasing. Every event, everything. There's plenty of bad news in this old world. So, what if you changed your life? What if tonight you decide, I've got too much stress in my life? I'm going to start getting up every morning. I'm going to start before I go out, before I leave my house. I'm going to pray. I'm going to spend some time talking to God about what's going on in this day. Number 7, you want to decrease the stress in your life. Jesus has been ministering. It's one of the busy times of his life. In fact, Mark 6, a preacher told me one time, is the busiest day in the life of Jesus. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I don't know how he knew that, but it's certainly a busy time in his ministry. There are so many people coming to him and wanting to be healed and wanting to be taught. The text says he didn't even have time to eat. He's exceptionally busy. It's a high time of business in his life. And so look at he said to them at the middle part of the verse there, you come apart into a deserted place and rest a while, for there were so many coming and going, they had no leisure so much as to eat. Principle number 7 is the principle of relaxation or recreation. And the lesson here is to take time off to enjoy life. He said, come with me by yourself to a quiet place, a deserted place, and get some rest. He said, you deserve a break today, so let's get up and get up. No, that's not what he said. I love Mark. You know, if you read the Gospel of Mark aloud, it'll take you, the average reader will take him 1 hour and 6 minutes. It's the shortest of the Gospel accounts, 16 chapters, where Matthew takes 28 and Luke takes 24 and John takes 21. It's the shortest of the Gospel accounts. Mark comes along, it's fast-moving, it's fast-paced. But in the midst of all this fast-paced, fast-movement, hectic life of Jesus, he told his disciples, you need to get away and rest a while. One reason that Jesus could handle the stress in his life is he knew when to relax. Now, I don't pretend to understand everything about the fleshly side of Jesus versus the human side of Jesus. That's a study we could spend months and months on and still not exhaust it. But it certainly appears he knew when to let go. And frequently you'll find him getting up early to go and be by himself, to go in the mountains, or go to a desert place to retreat, to be alone, to rest. Somebody says, but I don't know how to meditate. I get bored. Let me tell you something. If you know how to worry, you know how to meditate. We may say this Sunday at some point, but worry is when you take a problem and you think about all the negative, all the things that could happen because of that problem. You roll it around in your mind, you think about this could happen and that could happen, this bad thing could happen and that bad thing could happen. Meditation is when you take the same problem and you add God to the mixture. Yeah, this could happen and that could happen. But with God, here's what God could do with it. Here's what God could handle this with. Here's how God would do with this. That's meditation. I know we don't follow the 10 commandments today. 9 of those 10 are repeated in the New Testament, so we do follow those. But in them is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And while we don't obey that command because it's not in the New Testament, it appears from the beginning of time from Genesis chapter 2 that rest was a part of God's plan. They're not optional in our life. We've got to find some time to rest. It's not something we can just say, I'll rest today and I'm not going to rest tomorrow. We've got to have some time in our life. In Jesus' words, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. God knows our physical, emotional, mental, spiritual condition demands periodic breaks for us to be the best we can be. Phillips is a paraphrase, not a translation, but I like the paraphrase in Matthew chapter 11 and verse 19 where it says, Jesus came enjoying life. And a lot of people didn't get that about Jesus, why He enjoyed life so much. And Paul wrote to Timothy, he's writing about people who are rich and remind them to not trust riches, but the last part of that verse says, but to trust in God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Some people have a problem enjoying the blessings of God. And you know what God would say to you if He was talking to you? He'd say, stop it. I gave it to you to enjoy. Enjoy. Don't waste. Don't be somebody who just is irresponsible. But do enjoy it. Some of us like old Charlie Brown, you know. I think I'm afraid to be happy because whenever I get too happy, something bad always happens. I know some people in my life that they're not happy unless they're miserable. What a weird sentence, right? But you know those people too. You might be sitting here tonight. You might be one of those people. Life was meant to be enjoyed, not just endured, like trying to read that slide. Anytime you ignore any of these principles, you're asking for trouble in your life. You're asking for stress in your life. You're asking for tension in your life. It'll bring more stress if you ignore these principles. But if you'll put these principles in your life, there'll be tremendous stress relief in your life. Now, I told you there are 7 of these. There are actually 8. What I told you is there are 7 from the life of Jesus. There's one more principle. It's not from the life of Jesus because Jesus didn't need this principle. And the text read it to us earlier from Matthew chapter 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. There's a stress reliever, isn't it? Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. The 8th principle is to give your life and your stress to Jesus, and that is the principle of transformation. Come unto me. He is a great stress reliever. He is the Prince of Peace. With Him you get harmony and you get strength. With Him you get peace. A peace that Paul would say passes understanding. The greatest single stress of our lives is when we try to live them apart from the one who made us and knows what will release and bring stress into our life. Look at Jesus' words. Peace I leave with you, not as the world gives, but as God gives. It's amazing. And Paul calls it a peace that passes understanding. It doesn't really pass understanding to us. It passes understanding of the world looking at us, who say, how in the world can they be at peace in the midst of their loved one dying or some calamity going on? This history is replete with lessons of believers who stepped forward in the midst of some disaster or tragedy and took charge or served well when everybody else was falling apart. It's a peace that doesn't make sense to a worldly person. You don't need a new leaf in your life. You need a new life. Come to me, he says, and I'll transform you. Tonight, if you're not a Christian, I'm glad you're here. And I want to assure you that if you make the decision tonight to become a Christian, that is a decision you will never regret. I've talked to many people in my life who said, I wish I'd become a Christian sooner. I've talked to people who are on up in years who have said, I'm so sad that I never became a Christian. And they think it's too late for them. It's not, but they think it is. And they're full of regret. But I've never talked to a single person who said, the worst day of my life, the decision I made I regret the most, or I regret it all, is the decision to become a Christian. It'll change your life. That's what it's designed to do. So if you're not a Christian tonight, we don't belittle you. We're not mad at you. In fact, the greatest thing could happen tonight would be for you to say, I'm ready. And every Christian in this room would be delighted for this service to be extended as you were added to the body of Christ. Upon your confession, simple confession, I believe with all my heart that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. With a desire to turn away from sin, it's held you captive too long. And based upon that belief, to be baptized into Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins. It's amazing what He can do. It'll change your life forever. Tonight's your night.